So anyway, what a blessing she's been. We're in the book of Mark, and we are studying the parables, and I want to suggest to you the reason we've had Vicki in front of you, always, hopefully you're asking the question, why are we having this testimony? What's the point? And with the parables, if you were here last week, one of the things we discussed is parable means to cast alongside. So it's when Jesus gives a very obvious surface story, there's a much, much deeper truth that and not just one, there are many truths, layers to truth that we need to try and figure out what does this mean for my life today. In a sense, Vicki and CF is a walking parable. There's a lot of truth there that by the time we get done with the message today, I hope all of us are going to be asking ourselves, okay, I think she's figured some of this out. What would it look like for me to do this type of ministry, but in a way that I'm gifted and called and a little bit more comfortable with? Some of you are comfortable with that. That's great. But I really want to push on this a little bit. If you're at home, same thing. It goes to the ultimate question, what is a disciple? What's the purpose of discipleship? It's a really big question. What's the point of being a disciple of Jesus Christ? If you want to be a disciple of Jesus Christ, if you claim to be a disciple of Jesus Christ, what is the point? What's the purpose of your discipleship? Now, last week we ended with, there was the parable of the sower, and we had 4 categories of seed, and the last one was the seed that fell on good soil that would bear a harvest, we said, not just fruit, but a harvest, 20, 30, 60, 100-fold. And the idea there is most of us think in terms of harvest, it just has to do with me. Harvest is when I'm finally have peace and love and joy and kindness and goodness and patience and faithfulness and self-control. I've got it all worked out. Me and Jesus, we got this. I'm bearing fruits of the Spirit. That's what a harvest is. It's true. I can deny that. But the other definition of harvest that is just all throughout the Scripture, harvest refers to disciples. Disciples are the ultimate harvest at the end. So this idea is the church, people who follow Jesus, Jesus formed the church to get people to go out into the world on behalf of Christ, sow seed, water it, plant it, grow it, see what God does with it, so that more and more disciples will be what? Grown, exactly. Glad you're listening. I'm going to call on you again. So with that kind of introduction, in Mark chapter 4, we get to the second parable, and it's a short one, but it is very like everything with Jesus. There's just more to it, right? So Jesus says to them in verse 21, "Does anyone bring in a lamp in order to put it under a basket or a bed?" The answer is no. Where do you put a lamp? On a lampstand. Parable done. So simple, right? You put a lamp on a lampstand. Seems so easy. Or is it? Some of you may have heard the old joke. There's a doctor, a lawyer, a priest, and a little boy, and they're all up in a plane. I'm telling a joke that y'all, excellent. All right, Don, you take notes on this. Don't take this personally if you're a doctor or a lawyer. Don't mean it anyway, but so the pilot goes back and he says, "Sorry to tell you all the plane's going down. You better grab a parachute and jump because you're not going to make it otherwise." And he grabs a parachute and jumps out. And the 4 of them are sitting there. They're like, "What?" They're, "Eh." And so the doctor says, "Well, clearly I need a parachute because I heal people, so I need to go first and help other people." So he grabs a chute and jumps out. The lawyer says, "Well, lawyers are the smartest people in the world, and we need smart people to fix stuff." So the lawyer grabs one and jumps out. And the pastor looks at the little boy and he says, "Look, little boy, I want you to live. You need to live. You should live. I'm willing to give my life for you, and here, you take the parachute." And the little boy says, oh, don't worry, the smartest man in the world just took my backpack. Huh? So there is a point to that, and selfish people just don't get it. Selfish people are a menace to everybody. Matter of fact, I would suggest to you that if somehow we could overcome this deep and dark sin of selfishness, it would fix most of the problems of our world. There are others, of course, but selfishness is one of the big ones. If you were here a while back, we talked about the temptations of Jesus at the first of our study of Mark. And the first temptation for Jesus, Satan comes up and he says, I know you're hungry, turn that stone to bread. And Jesus is like, I'm not going to do it. And what I wanted us all to think, why wouldn't he do it? I mean, nobody knows who's it going to hurt, right? But Jesus very deliberately wanted us to know he was never going to use his power for himself. You never see Jesus doing selfish things. Matter of fact, that's one of those, I'll challenge you. Find a place, show me where you see Jesus being selfish. So God is not selfish, Jesus is not selfish, and if Satan comes to Jesus with this temptation of selfishness, you might guess it's a big deal. It's hard to not be selfish. Self-preservation, right? Survival of the fittest, and I'm clearly the fittest, and I don't care what it takes to survive, even if that means walking all over whoever gets in my way. Is it all about you? Is your life all about you? Is your faith all about you? For most people, if they're honest, the answer is, of course my faith is all. I'm a spiritual person. I pray to God, and me and God, we got it worked out. And that's the end of it. As if the reason Jesus went to the cross, all of this stuff we call faith, and it's about you, right? For you to be saved, and that's the end of it. Is it? Bunch of scriptures here. In Matthew 24, verse 12, matter of fact, let's not turn to that one. I'll tell you that one. Let's do turn, if you have your Bibles, to 2 Timothy chapter 3. In Matthew 24, Jesus is talking about the end times, and the end times we do need to understand, as Jesus very clearly says, this world's not going to go on forever. There's going to be a point where people are so mean, they're so uncaring, and how about this? They're so selfish that Jesus and God look down at us, and he's like, enough. Literally in Matthew 24, Jesus says, when the day comes that everyone's heart grows cold, God's going to put an end to it. You ever met somebody with a cold heart? What does that mean? I'm asking. What does it mean if you have a cold heart? It means you don't care, right? It means you've had a conversation, you've shared something, you've had an argument, whatever it is, the person, when it comes to that interaction with them, you look at them and you're like, wow, cold as ice. There's not one bit of them that cares, and especially if they're selfish, right? They don't care about anyone but themselves. When everybody's selfish, everybody's heart grows cold. When the world revolves around me and everyone is me, you can bet at that point God's going to say, okay, we're done here. Why? Well, what's the point of our existence? To love. The point of life is to love God, and where we're blessed with them, love other people. Yes, as we love ourselves, but that's in a healthy way. And loving ourselves in a healthy way is not being selfish. It's being a good steward and taking care of ourselves and having a healthy identity. So in 2 Timothy, we get some pretty specific words on this, which I hate to tell you all, but given our political climate and our societal climate, this is not something to be encouraged by. It's almost something to be a little bit, wow. We are closer to the end probably now than we've ever been before. The world around us, have y'all noticed? It is a cold and heartless world. People are just getting meaner and meaner. I'm going to hit this a little bit at the end, but you know, we're moving towards the election, and our politicians are this and that, and many of you are like, Thomas, aren't you going to vote for my candidate? And we got people on both sides of the fence, and I'm like, I hate both of them. They're like, how could you say that? I'll tell you how I can say that. Show me any of our politicians who are taking a stand for Jesus Christ. Show me any of our politicians, and of course they're going to say, oh, we got to separate church and state. We do now. We do now. But just because we say you got to separate church and state, are we basically saying, so if you're elected to any public office, that we're never, ever going to talk about godly standards, godly principles, and the true things that are necessary to heal our land? What's going to heal us, huh? A vaccine? What is the real sickness in our society? I'll tell you one of them. We are so selfish. And we're going to hear from all the candidates saying, you deserve more. You deserve better. Why? Because why do you deserve more? Who amongst us deserves anything except what God says, I will bless you with this? Anyway, I'm intentionally going to talk, I want us to think about this. We're moving into a day, and all of our candidates are representing us as a people who are very selfish. We just are. And as we get closer and closer to the end of days, it's not going to get better. In fact, what we hear from 2 Timothy chapter 3, and I'll just read a couple verses. Understand, so tell me, if you didn't know this was written 2,000 years ago, just try and take your mind out of that, and I'm going to write this as if this is my opinion, my op-ed piece for today. In the last days, people will be selfish and they're going to love money. They will be the kind of people who brag and who are proud of themselves. They slander other people with no thought. They don't care about their parents. They're ungrateful. They're unholy. They're unloving. They're contrary. And they are critical. Surely that doesn't apply to us, right? Isn't that crazy? They will be without self-control and brutal. Note riots, looting. I mean, it's brutal stuff, and we're looking at that saying that's okay. We are. You may say, I'm not, but societally, there are people who are absolutely saying brutality, that's fine. They are disloyal and reckless and conceited. They love pleasure instead of loving God. No relevance at all to today, is there? At the heart of all that is this idea of selfishness. The first temptation of Jesus. It is one of these deep, profound Christian truths that is way more difficult to deal with than saying, okay, I'm going to have Sabbath holiness, I'm going to go to church, I'm going to have a devotional and read my Bible, I'm going to tithe 10%, just write a check, right? I'm going to give food to the hungry, and I'm going to have Christian friends, right? No, this is like Christianity elective stuff, right? We've passed 101, we've passed the second sophomore classes, we're like deep into doctoral work with Jesus. Selfishness. Do we even have an awareness when we're selfish? I think most of us, we just don't. Me too. I got to tell you, this is one of those things as I'm working on this sermon, I'm going, man, our congregation has a problem. Right? Philippians 2:4, look not after your own needs, but the needs of other people. Romans 2:8, those who are self-seeking, they will face the wrath of God. Ouch. Luke 9:23, if you want to be my disciple, you have to deny yourself. Literally, I could read hundreds of scriptures. It goes on and on and on about how we are called to be unselfish people. You can't be a follower of Jesus and also be absorbed in yourself and what's best for you and not thinking about the people around you. This is one of the things that's so difficult. You know, we've everybody knows the political movements about discrimination. Whether it's Black Lives Matter Day, I don't care what your opinion on that is. You know, we had discrimination against women. We've got discrimination against African American and Hispanic and now Indian and this. And it's like everywhere you look, is it really discrimination, or is it the people who discriminate? They don't care about these other folks, whoever they are, because of selfishness. It's not the only thing, to be clear. There's lots of stuff that goes into what's wrong with us and how we can look at other people as if I'm better than you because I'm me, which we all know that's kind of true with me and Cameron, but it's just, this is not the way of Christ. You want a recipe for a marriage disaster? One selfish person and another one who's willing to give. You want a recipe for having a horrible experience trying to raise your kids? You let those kids figure out that they can be selfish and make their own way, and you parents have to follow. I mean, it's just any relationship in the church. I mean, staff members, if I get Cameron, Vicky, James, anybody begins to think, look, what we're doing here does revolve around me, and if you don't operate the way I want to, well, then you know where y'all can all go. You're doomed. So we look at the discipleship pathway, and this is on the back of your bulletins. I just want to talk you through it again, because I want to ask the question, what is the point of being a disciple of Jesus? If it is not simply bearing fruit, that is part of it. But if the harvest means that there are people accepting Christ in the world, and when the end time comes, when Jesus says, I'm going to separate the wheat from the tares, which is one of the parables we'll get to next week. The wheat, the good seed, the harvest, those are Christians who've been exposed to the gospel. Where are they exposed to the gospel? Well, that's something we need to talk about. Hopefully, out of those 57 kids, a few of them were exposed to the gospel and the seed planted a little bit. And hopefully someone else along the way is going to water it. Someone else along the way is going to help it grow. That's how this works. So back to discipleship pathway, we have this idea of a baseball diamond, and I'll just write it up here for us. In fact, I'm going to stop at the third, because when we're early on in our faith, you can call this the seeker, the explorer. It's people who are out in the world and their lives are falling apart. Their marriage isn't working. Their relationships aren't working. They've tried the money thing. They've tried the job thing. They've tried all this stuff, and it's not working. And usually what happens, which I hate that is this way, but something begins to fall apart. They finally look at God and say, I need help. It's not always the way it works. Sometimes you're doing well and you have kids and you're like, maybe I ought to raise my kids to know Jesus a little bit, because in the world, where are they going to get it now? But usually something happens and we finally look at God saying, I can't do this anymore. And God's like, good, let me help you with that. I've been here the whole time. And so we started exploring, we started asking questions, and if you've been blessed, then you're going to be in a place where there are witnesses to the narrow path of Jesus. And in this country, at this point at least, there still are witnesses. If you're one of these folks over in China or Russia, it's much more difficult, isn't it? But here, for most folks, you begin to get this idea of, if I want to explore faith in God, what does this look like? What might God's will look like? Hopefully you can have a church nearby, or maybe a Vicky comes into your neighborhood, or whatever, and you're exposed to this. Usually it's going to be someone you already know. A friend, a neighbor, family member. That's usually how this works. They introduce you to Christ, and you're like, you know what? I'm ready to take this seriously, because I've taken every other path seriously, and look where it's gotten me. Good. So, in essence, the ball is pitched, and we hit I guess we're definitely not on the Rangers right now. We're on some other team that actually hits the ball every now and then. Astros, even though they're cheaters, we still, anyway. Oh. All right, so first base, we step up to the plate, and we're like, you know what? I'm ready to give this thing a shot, and we accept Christ. We get baptized, and hopefully, if you're in a decent church, you're going to hear things like, okay, here's where you start. You have a daily devotional. What is that? Well, I'm glad you asked. And you should have a Jesus calling book, or whatever. You get a devotional book, and you hear the pastor saying, you need to go to church on Sundays, and you need to have a holy Sabbath, and you need to get your money right with God. No, not just tithing 10% and getting debt free. You need to serve the poor. You need to develop a small group of Christian friends. You need to work on that. And you need to witness to your faith. And we hear that stuff, and if you're on first base, you're like, well, that sounds kind of cool, but I'm not about to do all that. That's way too much, Tithing, seriously? Yeah, I knew you were after my money. That's what we think. But somewhere along the way, we start to do this, and we are beginning, right? We're beginning to see it's not just that, but when you follow Jesus, this stuff works. And so you start going to church and you leave, even on a Saturday, and you're like, I feel better. I can't really explain it, but I'm glad I feel better. Yeah, you do. Not because of me, not because of Barry's excellent singing or Cameron's excellent drumming. You feel better because you're spending quality time with Jesus. Because when you spend time with Jesus, you feel better. That's how this works. Now, sometimes the tears come because when you're with Jesus, the sickness is exposed. He's like, we're going to have to work on that. But we start doing this stuff, and it begins to help. There ain't no microwave. No. It begins to help. We're beginning. Then you make this commitment to say, you know what? What I've tried has worked so far. I'm finally going to listen to Thomas's boring old message that I need to have a devotional every day. I'm going to try it. Then all of a sudden you get a Doug Wilson up here who's been trying it for 6-7 years, hadn't missed a day. He's lost his marriage. He's lost jobs. His life's been like this. He's up here with tears in his eyes last week saying the thing that got me through it was my daily walk with Christ. It works. He's like, and then I figured out when I tithe, yes, 10%, not this made up number. When I tithe, I feel better. Right? When I have Sabbath holiness, when I take the whole day off like Jesus commands, me and my kids and my dogs and my pigs, right? Everyone in the household stops for a day a week to breathe the Holy Spirit, to think about things that matter, to spend quality time with God and each other. Still about me, right? I feel better. There's something right about that, like that hole in my heart is starting to be filled, to heal. The problems are getting fixed. And I go and I serve the homeless. I'm giving them time and energy and money, and yet I walk away from that, right? I feel better. And you have Christian friends that you maybe didn't have before you became a Christian. And you nurture that. Whether right now it's Zoom for 8 months. Yeah, we're all tired of Zoom, but you do what you got to do. But you work on having 6 or 7, doesn't have to be 8 million, right? Just a handful of folks that you can say, hey, pray for me for this. Or they hear you're going through something, they're like, I will pray for you. Or let's go have coffee. Let's talk. And no, they don't offer the best advice. No, sometimes they say stupid stuff. You're like, how could they say that? They're trying. Just like when they go through stuff, we're trying. We're not perfect. But they're there. And let me tell you what it feels like when you're going through a valley and you've got a Christian friend who gives you a hug and says, I'm praying for you and I care for you. I don't know what I can do, but it helps and you feel better. This stuff works. And then all of a sudden you start hear Jesus saying, oh yeah, you need to forgive all the people who've ever hurt you. Never go to bed angry. You need to give thanks in some circumstances, the ones that you want to. The other stuff, get as mad as you want, right? No, give thanks in all circumstances. Rejoice always. And you begin trying this stuff. You realize it's way harder than it sounds, but as you try, you feel better. And then you hear Jesus saying things like, don't be anxious about anything. And you feel yourself every day being anxious. COVID, okay, I'm anxious. Half the church isn't coming. I'm anxious. Lord, what's going to happen? Woe is me. And then Jesus says, I told you not to be anxious, didn't I? Yes, Lord. Then stop. I can't. I can't stop. And you hear Jesus saying, let me help you with that. I know this is hard. And over time, you begin to be less anxious. And you feel better. Look, you're just a second base. You're just beginning to figure out, one, which is what we've been talking about for a while now, that when Jesus gives you commandments or rules, it's for your best interest. When Jesus says, don't do this, He's not doing it be mean to keep you out of doing something amazingly fun. He's saying, don't do this, because if you do, there are going to be negative consequences that you have no idea about. But once you get stuck in them, you're going to then have to pray, Lord, deliver me from temptation, because I can't get out of this anymore. It's too appealing, even though I know it's ruining me. Don't do that stuff. You do the right stuff, and you feel better. It is liberating. The truth sets us free. But look, you're on second base. You still haven't really figured out what it means to be a disciple. What you figured out is that when you follow Jesus, it works. And that when you follow Jesus, He's telling you this stuff because He loves you and He wants you to have a better life. He does. And it fills you with light. Jesus said, John 8, I am light of the world. And that flame in you begins to burn and glow. Now you're making progress. Because at that point, you feel better. Your light is warming, the light of the world, Jesus in you, right, is burning brighter. You're feeling better. Your life is warmed up. You have more direction even through all the mess of life. Like you can kind of see a path that you couldn't see before. It's like, I know how I'm going to get through this. And you get to this one point where for most of us, we hit a roadblock. Because we start going to third base and we think, well, isn't this the point? There is nothing else, is there? I mean, the idea is for me to feel better, for me to be warmed up, for me to have guidance, for my problems to be fixed, for me to bear fruit. I read John 15. I need to bear fruit. And the answer is, yes, that's part of it. But then what? In Mark chapter 3, you don't need to turn, you've heard of it, Jesus called 12 disciples. He said, come follow me. He drew them in. He then taught them and spent time with them. He invested in them. He filled them with light. And then in Mark chapter 6, I believe. Did you put it? Yep. He sent them out. To do what? To share the light that Jesus had given them with other people who were living in darkness. That's why He sent them out. What would have happened if Jesus would have called the 12 disciples, filled them with light, and then said, we're good? What would have happened when Jesus was crucified? He comes back from the dead. He never ever says you need to go out and share your life with other people. The point is, you sit at my feet, learn from me, and be content. The whole movement would have never even begun. Right? At the very end, Matthew 28, Jesus said, okay, I've taught you how to be disciples. I've taught you how to be filled with light. Now I want you to go into the world and you make disciples. Is He talking just to pastors? Is He talking just to Vicky Bone and people who are leading CEF? Who's He talking to? All disciples. All of them. Which brings me to here. You know that you're rounding third base and you're becoming a maturing disciple when you realize your life is about making other disciples. Rather than coming to church to get a nice Jesus sandwich, a nice Jesus coffee, right? So you can be fed and watered. You're coming to church, yes, hopefully to get meat. But it's to give you strength, enable, empower, equip you to then go out into the world to share your light. Love this verse. We all know Jesus said, I'm light of the world. If you don't, Jesus said, I'm light of the world. But in Matthew chapter 5, one that we often forget, or maybe we haven't heard, but it's a big one. Matthew chapter 5, 14. And notice, if you have your pencil, right beside this passage, put Mark 4:21, because it's the same idea of the parable. Jesus just gives more information, more descriptors here. Before the parable, Jesus says, y'all listening? You are light of the world. Now I thought Jesus was light of the world. Yeah, he is. But when you receive the light of Jesus into your heart and your heart begins to warm up and glow, Jesus says, when I am in you, you are light of the world. And then our parable, a city on top of a hill cannot be hidden, neither do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, or in terms of Mark, or a bed. They put it on the top of a lampstand. Y'all see the imagery? You're light of the world if you've accepted Christ. There is not another light of the world. And I do want to bring this back to politics and COVID. We are so happy. Man, I hate Facebook. I just got to tell you. But I still go on there anyway. I'm getting to where I can't hardly even, I go to Fox News, I go to CNN, I go to Yahoo News. I'm like, everybody's spinning the same information 8 million different ways. Like, there's no way any of us are really going to know. But we all believe it, though, because you go on Facebook, and I'm not speaking to anybody individually because I know half the church is doing this. So if I'm talking to you, then yes, I'm talking to you, okay? But don't take it personally. So many of our folks on Facebook, you're prefacing what you say with this: I don't care what anybody thinks, but, and then, we're supposed to wear a mask, we're not supposed to wear a mask. We're supposed to go to school, we're not supposed to go. We're supposed to vote for Biden, we're supposed to vote for Trump. And it's just like, bleh. And everybody who's doing this, think carefully about what I'm about to say, has every hope that whoever's reading what they're saying will become a disciple of them. And I will suggest to you that's exactly what the Democrats want. That's exactly what the Republicans want. They want us to be disciples who will do what they say, when they say, how they say, as they say. Why are we so quick when we know it's going to make people angry? You know it. When you talk about whatever the perfect truth of COVID is, or whatever the perfect truth about Biden is or Trump is, you know it's going to create conflict. Why are we so quick, and it's so easy to put all that, knowing we're going to make enemies, sometimes of our friends, and yet we aren't willing to put one word on there about Jesus? I'm really wanting to poke the bear on this, folks, because I don't think it's right. Christians, we think somehow that my faith is just about me and my faith between me and Jesus, and yet Jesus says, look, I formed disciples to send you out into the world, to be a lamp on a lampstand. Why? To beat people with a stick? And this is the one that really caught me this week, and I hope I'm coming across clearly. When's the last time we grieved because our friends or our family were walking the wide and easy path? And we grieved not because of them making bad choices, but because we knew when you don't follow the will and ways of God, that only ends in pain. When is the last time, whatever party you're all for, right? that you looked a little deeper than what they're saying on the surface. And you were grieved because whatever candidate you said, to me it's like, which is the better of the two worst ones, right? But you look at it and you're like, where is Jesus in this? Where are the truths of God in this? Where are we seeing our politicians model what it means to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us? Where are we seeing Jesus from our leaders? And what we get angry about it, but we often don't grieve. And the reason I say, and I hope that you'll think about this, we should grieve is because, folks, when we don't have people out in the world being light to the world, do you know where the world's going? I talked a couple weeks ago about the two umbrellas. Jesus is very clear about this. There's the domain of God, the dominion of God, where people love God, they're trying to follow the Lord, they're trying to do what's right. They're living under the umbrella, right, as a citizen of God, and they're like, okay, God, I may step outside of your umbrella, but I'm really trying. There's only one other umbrella. It's the dominion of this world. It's the only other one. There aren't multiple umbrellas. And Jesus is very clear in our society. We're so smart, we're so scientific. There's no devil, there's no Satan, there's no spirituality, there's no spiritual warfare, right? It's just, well, that's not what Jesus says. And where I want to push all of us is to see you are light of the world. You are salt of the earth. But if salt loses its saltiness, if a light is put under a blanket, then what's left? Darkness. Folks, that's what's left. And in our society, we have absolutely taken the gospel of Jesus Christ and our leadership over many years. This is not either politician now, right? This is lots of time going back decades. We have slowly but absolutely taken every bit of gospel and light and Jesus and Bible that at one point was at the foundation of what it meant to be a citizen of this country. And we've turned that upside down, saying that if you talk about these things, right, you don't even deserve to be here anymore. You need to shut your mouth. We don't talk about Jesus. We don't talk about the morals of Jesus, the right and wrong of Jesus. No, on either side. All we talk about is what our society has decided is right, whatever legislation has decided is wrong, and that's how we move forward. Folks, I'm not the one saying it. Jesus and the scriptures are very clear. The more we do that, the colder our world is going to become. Unless you think I'm hell and fire and brimstone, no. What happens when the message all around us no longer says, folks, we really need to love each other? Where are we hearing that? What happens when we never hear the message, we need to forgive one another? Forgiveness for the past. We need to be peacemakers. Where are we hearing this? And I'm telling you, the only place is in the church. Tell me I'm wrong. I could say private Christian schools. That's the other place that I would suggest. Or groups like CEF that go into schools and say, look, for those of you who want to hear what we have to say, we hope your child and you will come to the park and at least let us share with you the basics of what it means that God loves you and wants to fill you with light. Maturing disciples, the point is to make more disciples. The point is not to be dependent on a pastor or a church to just feed you, you go home until next week or next month you decide to come back and be fed again. The point is you become a faithful disciple. We become partners around the round table. And we say, okay, given my personality and my comfort level and what I can do, okay, Cameron, Okay, James, okay, help me. How can I be a disciple given my work or my... And that's where a pastor, an associate pastor, a connections director, that's where we can become so helpful for you. You don't have to come up with all this on you. You don't have to invent the wheel. That's one of the reasons we go to school. But you do have to want to do it. Which leads me to the invitation. I'm stepping on everybody's toes. I know it. Mine too, because sometimes I don't want to talk to people either because they're mean. Jesus says the field is ripe for harvest. The problem is the workers are too few. Jesus is like, here's how I see it. There are lots of people out there who they would actually say to you, yes. But I think part of it is culturally, we've gotten so ingrained in this idea that if I talk about Jesus to other people, I'm a horrible human being. Look, if you don't tell people about Jesus, I kind of think that's horrible. Because Jesus is the only way. Is that fair? Jesus is the only truth. There isn't any other. There isn't another path that people can take to fix their marriages, to fix their homes, to get their lives right with their money. There aren't all these, which the world says, right? Any path will get you there. No, it won't. It just won't. But if we don't tell them, who's going to do it? Let's get real personal. If you don't find creative and helpful and non-offensive ways to do this with the people you're closest to, the folks that you really want to be in heaven with you is my hunch, right? Who's going to do it? Who's going to do it? Jesus called the disciples and he sent them out. Jesus gave the disciples light so they could go out and be light. You are the lamp. You see it? You are the lamp. Have you put your lamp on a lampstand for all to see? Or have you accepted Christ and then hid it under the bed? Tough stuff. But this is the only way we're going to change the world. It's going to be one person at a time, one child at a time, sometimes one spouse at a time, sometimes one neighbor at a time, sometimes one coworker. There's no doubt you'll sprinkle seed a lot of places and they'll just throw it away. But for the folks who don't, I'm telling you, you will have changed their eternal future. And the harvest will have added one soul. We'll actually continue this next week. Let's bow for a minute. If you're at home too, I hope you'll think about this question. It's a tough question. Who's going to heaven because of you? Who is following Jesus because of you? Of all your family members you've ever known, of all the neighbors you've ever known, of all the coworkers you've ever worked with, who has the light of the world burning brightly inside of them because you shared your light with them? And then this, who is God calling you to be light to today? Chew on that for 1 minute, and then I'll close us with a prayer. Lord, thank you so much for being light for us, for warming up our hearts in dark times. And Lord, we pray that for the first half of that discipleship path, that we would follow your ways and that we would glorify you through all the fruits of the Spirit, and the harvest would be great. But Lord, for everyone here tonight, for all those online whenever they're watching. I also pray that we would see that there's always another step. Lord, for me too, that we would remember you didn't call the disciples to sit at your feet and then go home. But you called us, you called me to sit at your feet and then go out into the world as best as we can, as best as we're gifted and able to be your light to others. May you be empowered and equipped and enabled to be that light. May Jesus, our light of the world, shine in your darkness that you may be warmed up. May you know his peace which surpasses all comprehension. May you know the height and the depth and the width and the breadth of God's love for you. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for joining us. Quick word from Cameron. Cameron's up front. So glad you joined us. We'll see you next weekend. If y'all would, please put your mask back on before you head out. And God bless you. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend.